Hi everyone, welcome to Write by Mia. I'm Mia, and in this writer's library, I will be discussing dun, da, 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 A Promised Land by Barack Obama. This is actually a Christmas gift, and it was the first book I read in the new year. It's very long, so I was very proud of myself for finishing. And though my previous videos have more focused on fiction and different novels, I thought it would be really cool to do something a little different. I've never been a huge nonfiction person, but I was really interested to read about and talk about with you all kind of Obama's journey and what he says about his first presidency and what he focused on, looking retrospectively at those first 4 years. So let's go ahead and get started. So I think it's a huge book. So when thinking about how to break it up, what I want to do with you all is first talk about like the before the presidency, and then within, once he gets elected, the domestic issues, the international issues, and then kind of like a general, what does this all mean? What was the point of this? What kind of are my general thoughts and feelings about it all? So first, the first couple parts of the book are, around him, running, gearing up to run, and all that led up to it. And I think what I really liked about this sort of beginning section and beginning part was hearing more from his perspective about what it took to even think about getting into politics. And it was honestly refreshing how kind of genuine he was and honest about the toll that him running and his political ambitions took on his marriage to Michelle. I've also read, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and so I, did know, and she shared, the toll, his kind of political career took on their marriage. But it was interesting to get it from his perspective, because though at times he did readily admit that, his ego and his ambition, had affected, his marriage and his family, there were other times where he just felt this deep internal need to do right, and that kind of was over everything else. So interesting to see both like his genuine acknowledgement of what his political career and the beginnings of that, what that meant for him personally, for his marriage and his family, but also this more like individualistic sense of needing to do right and needing to do more, and how that just overtook everything else. So it's an interesting kind of paradoxical way of telling the story, and I found it interesting, especially when juxtaposed with how Michelle, described that time, in the Senate and leading up to the presidency in her own book, Becoming. So that was kind of, the prelude to kind of the bulk of the book, which was his actual presidency. And it was a lot. I'm going to let y'all know it was a lot. There was a lot of detail, a lot of, history he gave, a lot of political maneuverings behind the scenes that he gave us some access to. So I'm not going to dive, super deep into the minutia of it all. But I did kind of want to talk about my thoughts on how he describes sort of like the domestic issues he was facing versus the international issues, and balancing all of the political chaos and craziness, with just the weirdness of being president and having your family be the first family and getting used to that very crazy fact. So domestically, a lot of his time in this book was spent on, of course, his two kind of biggest challenges, which, was passing healthcare reform and, of course, the recession and how to recover from the massive recession we experienced as a country. And to be honest, a lot of what he described made me so frustrated because a bulk of, the pages when discussing kind of, not only those two larger measures he hoped to get passed, but also, smaller things, climate change or other, domestic policy agendas, was just how difficult it is to get anything done. And so maybe in contrast to what Obama may have wanted to or felt, again, I don't know what he felt when writing it, maybe that he wanted us to see how genuine and how hard he fought to get things pushed through, and how he had to utilize all the people around him to, push this agenda and make life better for America. Instead of feeling like hopeful and like, wow, look at what they're doing, I think I just grew more jaded on just how impossible it is in politics to get stuff done. Because when you're faced with a staunch, Republican opposition, and you have to deal with the numerous political maneuverings and complexities of Congress and public opinion, and the financial, legal aspects of everything you're thinking of putting through, I feel like you can kind of just get stuck. And I was frustrated reading it, to be honest. I was like, no wonder nothing gets done. People can't agree on anything, and everyone's looking out for their own interests. So maybe that's not the rosy, optimistic view people would have expected, or maybe he would have expected people to have. But I just kind of grew frustrated, to be honest, reading it, because I was like, no wonder it took forever to get things done, or no wonder things don't get done and life doesn't get better. But it's not all negative. I will caveat all of that by saying the one consistent theme was Obama's just sort of dogged determination and sort of just his genuine desire to improve and make life better and fulfill the promises he made to voters, which in everything that's happened in 2020 and the past 4 years was actually really refreshing to read, despite the other frustrating aspects and what he described, policy and political wise. So that was sort of the domestic aspect. Interesting to read for sure, behind the scenes on what we all lived through during those years, but just very frustrating to read, I will say. On the international side, I was actually kind of entertained, and that's probably, I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but the way Obama describes the different world leaders was honestly just really kind of, I don't know, refreshing and humanizing, because I think, at least I do, when I picture world leaders or powerful international summits where they discuss climate change or financial regulation or something of that nature, I just imagine a room of very serious men and maybe a couple women thrown in there, discussing things that could change millions of people's lives, right? But it was funny, the way he described the different characters of these kind of international superpowers, and the humanization of them was really interesting and kind of funny. They all had their little quirks and idiosyncrasies, and this is especially prevalent at different international summits he attended. Now, of course, my feelings were very different when describing leaders, with human rights abuses on their records and all of that. That is a separate category, to be clear. But, specifically international summits or different leaders who they had diplomatic relationships with, I actually kind of enjoyed how he described them less as these, figures of international prominence, but as actual people who were, really trying to work together, country to country to help their people get through what globally had become a huge issue. So there can be a whole other discussion on, his record internationally. I really don't want to get into that because that's a whole thing. But, I think what I took away from the international sort of section was maybe the more humanization, like I said, of the individuals as part of that discussion. But I think there's also is, and I think this is just America's history, this element and this sort of air of imperialism still, and how we are always supposed to be the beacon of, hope and what is right, which I think we've seen in our history we're really not in a lot of ways. So not that it was disappointing to read, it was just kind of expected. If you're the leader of quote unquote the free world, obviously you view your country as the one that has to, be right and kind of spread peace and whatever democracy means across the world. But there was definitely sort of that air and element of kind of a bit of imperialism, perhaps, that kind of veiled a bit of what he was doing and saying. Not saying it's a bad thing. I just think America's been like that for a long time. So, what do I know? But that was the international side. And I found it interesting also, but not surprising, that he decided to end his book with the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden as kind of like the height of his kind of political career in those first 4 years. I thought it was just smart to end on that. And I wasn't surprised that he decided to kind of leave off with that achievement. Beyond sort of those 3 separate kind of sections, one thing that I was expecting maybe a bit more of but didn't receive a lot of from him is just more of a commentary on kind of race and racial relations. He did speak at length about, during his run for president and everything, he had to, reconsider his relationship with a certain reverend who had made, inflammatory remarks, and trying to balance the real struggle of Black and brown people in the U.S. with trying to, maintain popularity and broad-based support, which is understandable, but I don't know, I just wanted more. I just wanted him to be maybe less tempered on that subject specifically, just given everything going on, and just the history of America as a whole, and just the systemic, racism and oppression this country, faces. So I was a bit disappointed in that, but maybe not necessarily surprised. Obama is a very even-tempered person, and this book is supposed to be, palatable to a wide audience. So there is that. And I did want to make that point as something that I came in kind of hopeful for, but didn't get a ton of, so ended up kind of being a little disappointed, but not super surprised. So overall, that was a lot to say. But overall, what did I kind of take away from this, especially given the broader context of where we're at as a country? And I think, despite a couple of the issues that I brought up, it was just really nice to have someone who is still so hopeful in what America can be. And I consider myself an optimistic person, but I think myself and a lot of other people have just mentally, it's just been a long year. And with the pandemic and police brutality and all of those other awful things going on in the world, this book and the tone throughout, despite the political chaos, despite everything he had to go through as president in those first 4 years, to just have a consistent theme of, I am doing this to fulfill what America should be to the people, all people who live within the country. And at its heart, foundationally, that is something I can get behind. And I think just really grounded the book and all that was said and, all the different things going on into something very genuine and real. And I appreciate Obama for that, because I guess I've kind of missed feeling that and hearing people say that. And so coming away, even if I did have some problems with it, I think that overall tone was so strong that I would definitely recommend this to people to read. If not for, because they like Obama, but just to kind of learn more about, I guess, what it means to be president and, how everything kind of works. It was interesting from that perspective. So I would recommend it. Perhaps not as strongly as my previous books, given I'm fiction biased. But if you want a little bit of hope and just to see some optimism and promise of what America could be, I would definitely recommend. And Obama, as always, is a great storyteller and a great writer. So I would recommend, and it was a great first read to start off 2021. So again, as always, I encourage you all to like and subscribe. These videos come out each month, and appreciate all of your ongoing support so far. And I guess that is it for today. Thank you all so much, and I'll talk to you soon.